Greetings viewers, and welcome back to Aussie Backyard Food. Did you know that mead, well, it's the oldest alcoholic drink known to man, and it was the main reason for the Vikings' fearless reputation in battle. And I'm not just talking about that drunken, blind courage that you might often see on display down at the local pub. I'm talking about something a little bit more deep and mysterious. If you're a beekeeper, or if you happen to be lucky enough to know someone with a surplus of organic raw honey, you owe it to yourself to have a crack at making some of this magical elixir of mystical inner powers. My mission for this episode is to tap into my inner Viking. During this episode, you're going to see me deal with all sorts of unexpected challenges, as per usual. One of which was a camera lens malfunction. Either that or it was some sort of mystical mist that rolled in partway through this production. Potentially a sign from the gods. In front of us here, you can see a couple of meads that I made earlier. These two demijohns, currently in the aging phase of their production. For today's episode, I'm going to take on a new challenge. My mission today is to create a Viking's blood sparkling mead using an ancient method called disgorging. So, whether you'd like to have a crack at making your own mead, or you're just here to get in touch with your inner Viking, I'd like to invite you to jump on board the good ship, Aussie Backyard Food and Garden. Let's get into it. Welcome to our orchard. Well, as it happens, we've got a tree full of blood oranges here. I really think some of those flavours would so well complement the natural characteristics of our homegrown honey. Look at the colour in those blood oranges. Bloody beautiful. Something else I like to do when I'm making mead is to sample a bit. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to my brewing vessel. It's called a fermentosaurus. I find it's a handy bit of equipment because it's so light, as you can see. PET, it's a conical vessel, so it means you can attach a bottle filling fitting to the bottom of it to fill your bottles with at a later date, of course. It's also got this handy little silt trap at the bottom. The first thing that goes in, check out the colour of that people. A litre of Viking orange blood. Next, a handful of pre-sterilised raisins. The next thing we're going to add is 5 litres of liquid gold. The next thing we're due to add is water. And what I like to do to prepare my water, because I usually just use tap water, is to add it to some sterilised demijohns and sit them out in the sun for a good few hours to allow the chlorine that's naturally present in our tap water to evaporate. Another thing to consider is how hard or soft your water is in your local area. Here in the Blue Mountains, it happens to be quite soft, low in minerals, which means a low pH. acid water, in other words. And by adding orange juice, we're making it further acid. So I've got a little bit of a trick for that. So to help bring the pH up, I'm going to use some mineral water, some still mineral water. You want to make sure also that you don't have any of that fake stuff that's quite low in some of these really desirable minerals that are going to add flavour and body to our finished product. Okay, so I've got 7.5 litres of still mineral water. Now it's time to add 1 of 3 teaspoons of wine nutrient. I'm going to add the other 2 teaspoons in the coming days. It's what we call a staggered nutrient addition. So 1 teaspoon now. I added the final 2 teaspoons roughly 3 days apart from each other. As I discovered, another advantage with these lightweight fermenters is they're easy to pick up. And one of the hassles with making mead is just how hard it is to mix that really thick syrupy honey in to the water to get your nice dissolved consistent must. Now it's time to add our dechlorinated tap water. We're going for about a 5-to-1 mix. So 1 litre of honey to 5 litres of water. There is a bit of a variable thrown in the mix, of course, this time. It's the raisins and the blood orange juice. One important thing to remember before you take your hydrometer reading is to make sure everything's well mixed in, because you don't want to simply be gauging the top 4 inches. You want to be getting a correct measurement for the whole lot. So because I'm after an easy drinking mead, I'm aiming for somewhere between 1050 and 1060 with my hydrometer. Let's see how we go. It looks like we're hitting right about 1052. So that means it's time to add our yeast and seal our vessel up. For this brew, I'm going with a dry lager yeast. This dry lager yeast, to be specific, is E491. It was recommended to me by Pat from Absolute Home Brew in Penrith. Now Pat, well, he's a bit of a local brewing legend. You might even say a brewing oracle with a direct connection to Odin. Now some of you brewing whingers are going to say, oh wait, stop, you haven't hydrated your yeast. Well, ask yourself, would Ragnar have hydrated and activated his yeast? I think not. I feel sure that Ragnar, he must have been a beekeeper. I arrived home from work the other day and just imagine my surprise when I found these 3 massive boxes full of hive equipment. And where does that hive equipment come from? Finland, the home of Ragnar. What? Well, it's now day 16 since we first put our brew down. It's time to take off the insulation and have a squiz. It's time to break our seal and get another hydrometer reading. I had hoped to get back to complete this next stage on day 14. We're sitting right on that mark there, which, as you can see, hopefully, is 10:30. You never know. Perhaps that extra couple of days might work out for the best. It's important to always think positive. Insights from Aussie Backyard Food. There might be another channel in that. So that means it's time to sterilise some bottles. 500ml swing top brewing bottles. Now this is a bit of a new thing for me, to be trying to make a draft mead, a bubbly mead. I'm actually on a gluten-free diet. That makes it hard when you like to drink beer. So the thinking behind this challenge is to make that low alcohol, easy drinking, any day sort of beer equivalent, if you like, just to go to in the fridge. Right, try and create that certain level of carbonation in my mead. I feel like I'm somewhat mitigating that risk of creating bottle bombs by using the swing top bottles. I reckon once they reach a certain amount of pressure, despite being a firm fitting lid, they should release a bit of gas before they explode. Let's hope. Another feature of this relatively cheap brewing vessel that I like is this butterfly valve at the bottom. The amount of times I've turned it on and off, I keep expecting it to fail. This whole vessel, this whole kit was $100 Australian. And yep, so far so good. Now it's time to take off our silt trap. Oh, look at that, there's a little raisin in the top. You know what, rather than waste all that, I'm going to pour the non-silt liquid component back in the top, I reckon. But look at the way that's carbonating already. Yeah, geez, I hope I'm not going to create bottle bombs. I think it's time for a taste test. Not bad. Quite fizzy. Well, getting a bit chunky now. And here's that bottle filling attachment I spoke of. Now it's time to start filling our bottles. And look at that. A finger of Odin shining on our operation. For surely it must be the sun. Put it right down the bottom of the bottle. Keep as much oxygen out of there as possible. Uh-oh. We seem to have a raisin blockage. Beware the sunken raisin. Let's try that again with a slightly larger hose. Bottle number 1. Bottle number 2. Time to fill our Viking mug. Here's to Odin. Skål! Not too bloody bad. So there we have it. 12 bottles of Odin's finest. That leaves us with around about 19-20 litres left of must that I'm going to finish in the traditional method to make a nice, dry, easy drinking, still mead. Apparently there's 2 litres unaccounted for. I can't work out what happened. Just evaporation, probably. The adventure continues. One other thing I thought I might try with this drop is a method that the traditional champagne maker was known for. I believe it's called traditional champenois, but for the Viking mead, we're just going to call it turning it upside down. What this does is it causes the silt to accumulate in the neck of the bottle. And after some weeks, because of the pressure that's built up within the bottle, and upon bringing your brew to almost freezing, you can pop the silt out. That traditional process I spoke about to do with Francois' method of making traditional champenois will require a slight agitation of the boxes at weekly intervals, just to dislodge the silt from the sides of the bottles and make sure that all that silt ends up in that neck of the bottle. The process is called disgorging. So look it up. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, don't I? I really don't. This is a new thing for me. We'll give it a go and see what happens. Welcome back to the lab. Well, it's been 16 days since we bottled up our potentially sparkling mead. And if you're wondering what the reason is for my personal protective equipment, this Aussie backyard food thing, it's creating a bit of momentum, and look, there's a lot riding on it. If the host would perhaps happen to be blown up by some exploding mead bottles, well, it wouldn't be good for the movement. It might give some short-term results, but I'm here for the long game. Let's have a look, shall we? Let's spin around and have a better look. There is some sediment in the neck. I'm thinking that still looks a little cloudy. So what I'm going to try next is what we call in the sparkling mead making industry cold crashing. Come back around here. I've got the camp fridge and I've got it set nice and low, 2 degrees. We're going to cold crash our potentially sparkling mead for a week. That should allow the sediment to drop. And more to the point, no freaking explosion. Before I leave you for a week, we've got another 20 litres to contend with, so I can ditch the PPE. That's better. Bit too hot for this. So with our still low alcohol Viking's Blood Orange mead, we're going to add some bentonite now. I found that works well with my other still meads in the past. To settle out the sediment, we add the bentonite, mix it through. Apparently, according to the text, it tracks all those floating particles of sediment and drags them to the bottom. Here I have my pre-prepared 150 mils of bentonite and water, which I've preheated and allowed to settle and blend in for 4 hours. So we've got to now mix that with some mead, which I'll drain from the bottom, then mix through the entire batch. Grab our sterilised water, give our hands a wash. Going to pour most of it back in, but once again, let's not pass up the perfect opportunity for a taste test. Wow, totally different to 16 days ago. Very dry. Quite nice though. Very drinkable. I can taste the orange. I can taste the honey. If it lasts that long, this will be perfect for summer. I could quite happily drink that any day of the week. Bit of mud. All right, hydrometer time. 10:05, 10:06. Bentonite is a natural product. It's clay. Very, very fine clay. I pride myself on not using any nasty chemicals and keeping all my alcoholic drinks preservative free. Once again, Sterilisation is so important. Another thing I've learned from experience, we don't want to put our airlock on until we've equalised and filled the sediment bulb at the bottom, because that simply drags that airlock solution, which in my case is vodka. I find it works well, and it's nice to have a quick shot at the end of the process. So first things first, we attach our bulb and equalise both vessels. We're nearing the end of this process. That bentonite should sit on our mead for approximately a week. Really what you're looking for is a lot of that sediment to get dragged through into this bulb at the bottom, therefore clearing that out. Our sparkling mead, I could even be drinking this next weekend. That's exciting. So there's something in here for everyone. Welcome back to the lab. It's the next weekend. So as you've seen, we just knocked the temperature down on our cam fridge to -6. The thinking in that is I want to just blast some Arctic type temperatures on our bottles, because I figure the first thing that's going to freeze will be the neck, which is what we want, and we should be able to blast that silk plug out. First thing, while we wait for that to happen, is to rack our still mead. Alright, I'm going to bring you in close for this because I'm really impressed. I'm quite impressed with that level of clarity. I'm not normally a follow a recipe type of a bloke, but I've found it's really been beneficial to keep notes on all the different meads that I've created up to this point. I just feel like it speeds up the learning curve somewhat. Other than having an accurate record of your listed ingredients, it's good to have a timeline. So I'm able to say that definitively we put this batch down 1 month and 9 days ago. I'm able to see that it was 24 days since we bottled up our potentially sparkling mead, and 8 days since we put our bottles into the camp fridge to cold crash. So while we wait for our sediment plugs to freeze, I'm going to rack our still mead up. And doesn't it look lovely? Well, as you can see, that airlock, it's totally motionless. Nothing going on there at all. Also, that level of clarity is a bit of a giveaway. Let's rack. Ooh, steady, steady. Let's check our gravity. Okay, so that's not much heavier than water. It's very dry. I'd call that 1.002. So without wanting to get too technical, let's have a look at a hydrometer. It's basically measuring the gravity of the liquid, the amount of fermentable sugars dissolved in that liquid. So when we started this fermentation, we came in 1.052 and we finished at 1.002, a considerably lighter liquid, and that's what the hydrometer does. It basically, a heavier liquid pushes it up, a thinner liquid will allow it to sink further down. The reason I chose a lager yeast for this operation is because of the fact I wanted to make a low alcohol mead. Each yeast will have its own characteristics. A lager yeast typically will have a low alcohol threshold. I probably could have added a bit more honey initially, or a bit more sugar in the form of raisins or orange juice, if I wanted to create a sweeter finished product. What's happened here is that alcohol is just topped out at 6%. There's no sugar left. Because I'm after a dry still mead, I'm happy with that. One of the other things I think is very important whenever you're racking is to always have a sample mug on hand. Yeah, it's somewhere to dump those dregs and have a bit of a taste test. It's traditionally thought that a good mead will need at least 6 to 12 months to hit its full potential. But more recent thinking, and with a few modern techniques, including that staggered nutrient addition, and particularly with a low alcohol mead, as we've seen in this example, you can get from start to finish in 40 days. Let's have a look at this still mead. I've decided I'm going to give it one more racking, so I'm going to let it sit in these demijohns for another couple of weeks. Then I'll rack it up again, and I should be able to get rid of even that slight bit of cloudiness in there. But as far as taste goes, I'm really pleasantly surprised. So now it's crunch time. It's time to sort the men from the Vikings. Do we have bubbles? Coming closer. Maybe I should have the goggles on for this. Nah, let's live dangerously. Woo! All right. Check it out. Blasted a bit of a plug out of there, right out of there. Woo! Covered my camera in it too. Anyway, let's have a look. We have bubbles. Oh, I'm so stoked. It's a little cloudy, but as they say in the pudding making industry, the proof is in the tasting. Quietly freaking stoked. You know, when I started this, I didn't even really know if it was possible. I heard of a few people doing sparkling meads. And I've mentioned my main motivation, just to have that easy drinking go-to in the fridge. And, you know, that certainly fits the bill. Not too sweet. A fair bit sweeter than this, but extremely dry. A nice, everyday, semi-sweet, sparkling. So obviously, by bottling, it does something to retard the fermentation process and preserve some of that sweetness. So that I might be able to store the other bottles without having to keep them upside down, I'm going to blast the yeast plugs out of those right now. And of course, I pretty quickly realised it's a bit of an outside job.